Welcome to a course on R programming. In previous lectures, we have learned that how to use the data structures and data types. In that one, we have discussed lists and data frames. We are talking about Unit 2, and under Unit 2, we have discussed mainly what is a class. We have discussed what is class attribute and what is factor attribute and how it is going to be used. We have discussed, and later we have discussed two important data structures. Those are, one is list, another one is data frame. In that lecture, we have discussed list is a collection of items, a collection of heterogeneous items. We have discussed that manner and how to create a list and how to access the elements from the list we have discussed. And as well as data frames also we have discussed. Data frame is a two-dimensional table kind of structure. And the important characteristics of the data frame is the lengths of the columns must be equal, and it is going to accept different data types. The intention of this, or the importance of the data frame, is to store the real-time data. As I told you, example, a customer data, a bank employee's data, or a student's data, many kinds of data, it's going to be available in two-dimensional format. So for that purpose, this data frame is useful. So like this, we have learned in previous sections how to use these data structures. Now in this session, we'll talk about how to load this data into our environment. The point is that loading into our environment. Loading into our environment. The question arises, why we need to load this data? What is the purpose? This one. Actually, in real time, the data is going to be available in the form of different types of files. And we wanted to do the analysis of that data. For this purpose, we have to load the data into our environment. What is this R environment? R environment is nothing but our integrated development environment, R Studio. This is the editor where we are going to write our programs or where we are going to do this analysis task. That is R Studio. So this R environment is nothing but R Studio. This is ID, Integrated Development Environment. So here the question is that how to load the data from external environment. If you see, you are going to get the data in different formats in real time. That is, it can be a .text format, or it can be an Excel format, it can be a PDF format, or it can be a CSV format. CSV stands for the comma separated value. CSV stands for the comma separated value. Separated value. This is. It's an important format. So this is very much similar to the Excel sheet, but the Excel sheet comprises multiple sheets. Sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3. whereas CSV comprises the only single sheet. And by opening this Excel, while we are saving, we can choose the option CSV to create this CSV file. So, in this way, there is a possibility to have a text format or PDF format or Excel format or CSV format. These formats data, we have to load it into RStudio, that is our R environment. We'll see how we are going to do this. Before going to load the data, we should know that one where we have to load the data. In the sense, in which location we are storing the data. For this one, we have a command called the getWD. The command is getWD. Here, WD stands for the working directory. Working directory. Working directory. So, first we have to know that what is our base directory, that is the working directory. For this one, we have the command called the getWD. This function is going to return us in generally where the R software is loaded. In general, that is going to be loaded in C drive. You are going to see that. In my case, it is in some other drive, F drive. But in real time, if we have not modified this directory, it's going to be in C drive. Here it is showing the full directory name. That is the drive name. It is showing the drive name, F drive, and next is the folders and subfolders where we are going to have our data. Okay. So this is our working directory. And if we wanted to change this working directory to some other directory, it is possible. For this one, we have a command called the setWD. setWD, that is set working directory. setWD. So using that setWD, we can able to change the working directory. To load the data into our environment, that is RStudio, we have two functions. One is read table, another one is read.csv. In these two, this is the old function and this is the latest function. So mostly we are using this function. And I have already told you the CSV stands for the comma separated value file. This is a special format of Excel sheet. Now we'll see the syntax of the read.csv that is available in read.table format only. If you observe this syntax, first argument is file. So this will tell us that the file name where our data is stored. As I told you, for example, if we have taken the bank employees data, that data we might have stored it as employee data.csv. That file we have to give here. While giving this file name here, if our working directory is decided and in working directory only, if we put our file, then we need not to give the entire file path. Whereas if we have not set our working directory, then we have to provide the entire path of the file. That is, from the drive onwards where the file have stored, that entire path we have to give. We'll see that what it is. And next is headers. Headers is, as I told you, in generally our data is stored in CSV file, and that is going to be stored in the columns and rows format, and columns will have column names. For example, employee data has employee number as a column name, and name as another column name, and salary as another column name. These column names are called the headers. Whether you want to keep these headers as it is or you wanted to rename them as 1, 2, 3. In most of the cases, while doing this data analysis, people are going to concentrate on the data itself instead of the concentrating on the column names. Because of that, whether you wanted to make the headers true or false, default it's going to be false. The R takes them as 1, 2, 3, etc. Later, if you wanted to analyze, you can change them. But while performing the operations, in generally, the R Studio will take the header names as 1, 2, 3 only. If you want to make the original header names, you can make this as true. If you want to make the original header names as it is, you have to make it as true. Then the separator. Of course, as we are using read.csv, and CSV is a comma separator one, defaultly its value is going to be comma. So we need not to do anything here. And rest of others are going to be more detailed things we are not going to discuss. But we are going to discuss one important thing is that this one. String as factors is equal to true here. String as factors equal to default dot string as factors. It means that while you are loading the string data, that is the character vectors, you wanted to store the data in the form of factors or not, it is asking. As a default, it is going to be string as factors. And you are going to see what this string as factors in next slide. So, this is how we are going to have the syntax of read.csv. To check this one, we can use this help command by using help, and in bracket, if we give read.csv, we can able to get the help of this function. Now we'll see an example of this read.csv. So here in my system, I have taken the students' mid-marks and I have stored that file with the name midmarks.csv. And here I have not mentioned the full path because my file is in the current working directory only. Because previously with the help of setwd function, I have set my working directory where this file is stored. So because of that, I have not mentioned the entire path of this file. And I said that string as factors equal to false. As I told you, defaultly it's going to be true, and we made this as false. And I used read.csv, and this is going to be loaded into another variable called the midmarks. Now the question is that what's going to be the data type of this midmarks variable? We'll see that. If you observe, the class of midmark is data frame. In generally, whenever we load the CSV files into our environment, it's going to be stored in the form of a data frame. So its data type is its class type is going to be data frame, and the data type, the data which we have in the list is, it's going to have a different type. So because of that, its type is going to be list type, because data frame is a combination of heterogeneous columns only, and these columns can have different types of data. So because of that, its data type it's going to give as list. And we'll see another important function, that is structure. Structure of the data frame. So by using read.csv, we have loaded the data into our environment, and that data is in the form of a data frame. But of course, we wanted to see that whether the data loaded properly into the R environment or not. To check that one, we have a function called the structure, str. To this structure, we are passing the variable which we have stored. So that variable is mid-marks. This is actually a data frame. A data frame. So this data frame structure we wanted to see, and the output is going to be in this format. If we closely observe this output, the first line tells us that what it is. It is a data frame. It's clearly showing. And how many objects we have? 32 objects. So in that file we have 32 records, or 32 students mid-marks we have stored. So because of that, it is showing it as 32 objects. Then 14 variables. As I told you, a data frame comprises of different columns. The column names are going to be called as variables. So those column names are 14 we have, and the 14 names are given here. First is register number, then these are the subject names: computer graphics, DA, software engineering, operating system, OSWT, R programming. Like this, we have given different column names, and each and every column name has the values, and those values are different types we have. Here you can observe the register number comprises the letters, because of that it is showing it as a character type. And CG we have mentioned a hyphen. In R programming, other than the NA, not available. Rest of all icons or all symbols are going to be treated as characters only. So because of that, if you don't have any data, you should not to put this empty symbol or hyphen, because that hyphen also treats it as one type. So here it has treated it as character type, and rest is having all numerical values. So because of that, it is taken integer one, and somewhere if we mentioned this character type, automatically it has converted them into other data type, and it is showing in the form of character. So ultimately, the structure is going to give us what is the data we have in the data frame, how many records are there, what are the variables, and what are their types, what are their class type. So ultimately, the str function, the structure function, is going to give us the structure of the data frame, which includes how many records are available, we are calling them as the objects, and how many variables are there, that is the column names, and what are their data types. We can know the entire structure of the data frame with this function. Next, as I told you, we are going to mention string as factors equal to false, but the default is going to be true, what it is actually. So if we take an example, here we have created a data frame. The data frame comprises the values a register number, age, subjects and sections. If you observe closely, the sections is having only two unique values, that is A and B. And when I load this data into our environment, and if I mention that string as factors, then this column is going to be considered as factors. And these factors we have discussed in last sessions when we are discussing unit 2 introduction. So here what happens is it is going to consider them as levels, and in these levels it's going to identify that how many unique values are available. Here we have only two unique values are available, so it's going to give us two levels, those are A and B. What is the use of these levels or these unique things? In the sense, R allows us to easily count the values, unique values. For example, here if you see total how many sections are available, if you want to know, if you convert this into factors, you can able to easily get that one. The levels it is going to give as 2, and you can able to identify that the sections are only 2. So in real life, if we have different types of data, okay, the ordinal type of data, then we can able to get this number with the help of this factors type. And in generally, if we see, the data is going to be look like this. But if you observe, here we are using the function called the factor. To this factor function we have passed this sections, and the output you are going to observe is levels. So it's going to give us that how many unique values are available. The unique values are available only two, one is A, another one is B. Like this, the factors is going to identify the values, identify the unique values which are present in the column. So this is an advantage sometimes. So you have to decide that while you are loading the data into our environment, you want to make the string values as factors or not. Okay. This depends on the requirement. And based on that we have to identify that whether to make this string as factors true or false. Now we'll see another way of loading the data. Previously we have seen a function called the load.csv. Using this function we have loaded the data. But the other way we have is we have the environment tab. While we are learning RStudio in first unit, we have studied that RStudio is divided into 4 windows. RStudio is going to be divided into 4 windows. This window is going to be command window, and this is console window, and this is graphs and help window, and this window is environment window. Now this is this window, environment window. In this environment window we are going to have a tab called the import dataset. If we click on this tab, you are going to get a drop down list like this. And in this drop down list you can check which type is you want. You want to load a CSV file, you have to select this form.csv. If you want to store the Excel, this one. If SPSS, this one, SAS, stat. Like this, the R supports different types and all types it is going to show. But mostly we are going to use this from CSV. And after selecting that from.csv, you are going to get this form. So in this form, we are going to use, here we are going to give our file name or URL, where our data is located. Here our data is located, okay, so in your drive and so folders, and this is our file name, deck.csv. This is the file I have created and I wanted to load this one. And what are the columns available in this deck? Here it is going to give you data preview. This is giving us, okay, face is one column name and suit is another column name. This is another column name, and the data types also it is showing us character type and integer type. So in this way, this wizard, this we call data loading wizard. This wizard helps us to load the data, and many options are available here, you can observe. And so this is the command which it is using internally, similar to load.csv, but here it is using read_csv defaultly and using this path storing the data. So this is how we can able to load the data in another way. Then we have a function called the view. This view function is going to give us the data. It is going to show how the data is loaded into our environment. You can see this one. This is our R environment, and in R environment, this is our file, and this file is showing in this manner. The face, suit, value are the column names, and these are the records we have. This is the record 1, this is record 2, record 3. In this manner we have the records. So we have a function called the head. This head function is going to show us first six records. First 6 records. So after loading the data, if I wanted to see that one, whether the records are loaded properly or not, to check that one, we have a function called the head. So this head function is going to return us first 6 records. In the similar way, we have a function called the tail function. So here, head default value is 6. But if you want to watch or if you want to see more number of rows, you can mention that value. Here I have mentioned that as 10. So it's going to give us 10 records. First 10 records it is going to give. So another function, as I told you, tail. The tail is going to give the 6 records from the bottom. Tail will give 6 records from bottom. With the help of this head and tail, head function and tail function, we can able to check that one whether the entire file is loaded properly or not, because head will give us first 10 records and tail will give us first 6 records and tail will give us last 6 records. So first and last records are properly there, then we can assume that the middle data is loaded properly. So by this way we can able to load the data. So this 6 is the default value. If we want, we can change this one. So now we have learned that how to load the data from external environment. So by using the read.csv function, we have loaded the data and assume that we have done some modifications to the data. We performed some operations on the data, and that modified data I wanted to store it in my hard disk. For this one, we have a function called the write.csv. This write function is going to write this file into our hard disk. So see the syntax of this write.csv. Of course, as I told you, that is named as table only, but we are using the CSV. Both are similar types. So here we are going to give the X. This X is the data frame. This X is the data frame where we did the modifications. So with the help of read.csv, we have loaded the data, and that is stored in a variable, and that variable we are calling it as data frame. And we did some modifications to the data frame, and now that data frame we wanted to store it into hard disk. So first we have to pass that data frame. So that data frame here we are passing here. And what is the name we wanted to give to the data frame? That name we have to give. That name we are going to give at this position. Name. So for example, so our data frame was deck. Okay. And to this data frame we did some modifications, and we wanted to store this one into another. We wanted to store it into hard disk. In this situation, what we are going to do is that we are going to pass deck, okay, to this function. Then the file name we are going to give as new underscore deck, that is, this is the modified one, dot csv. So this deck is a data frame which is present in RStudio, and this is the new name we are going to give to this modified deck, and this new underscore deck.csv is going to be stored in hard disk. And where it is going to be stored? It's going to be stored in our working directory where we set that one. And if you have not set that one, you have to mention the entire path here. That is the directory name and folders, etc., etc. You have to give where you wanted to store the data, the full path of the file. And rest of the things are going to be, we are not going to use very frequently. Okay. And this row names, if you wanted to make this true, you can break. Okay. Separator, as we are going to use the CSV, the separator in default it's going to be comma separator. Okay. By this way, with the help of this write.csv, we can able to store the data onto hard disk. So come to the summary, what we have seen or what we have learned in this lecture. First, we have learned that how to load the data. To load the data into our environment, we are going to use read.csv function. Next, we have learned about string as factors. That is how the string data is going to be represented in the factors, that is in the form of levels. Then we have learned two functions called the getWD and setWD. So this getWD is going to give us the working directory. Working directory. Where we are going to store our data. And if you want to modify this directory path, you are going to use the set working directory. With the help of this set working directory, you can modify the working directory. And we have learned two functions called the head and tail. The head is going to give us the first 6 lines of the data frame, and tail is going to give last 6 lines, last 6 records, and this is first 6 records. Why we use? To check that one whether the data is loaded properly or not. And finally, after doing the modifications, if I wanted to save this data onto the hard disk, I'm going to use the function called the read.csv. This function will store the data onto the working directory where we set. If we don't set that one, if we have passed the entire file path, there it is going to write our data. So while writing, we have to remember 2 points. One is the new data frame we have to give, okay, and the file name we have to pass along with the extension, with which extension you wanted to save, whether you want to use the CSV extension or some other extension. So by this way, we have learned in this session how to load the data and how to see its structure with the help of the structure function, and how to modify the data, how to see the data using head and tail, and finally how to write the data onto the hard disk. Thank you for watching this session.